Hey everyone, welcome back to I Know a Guy. I'm Anthony, and this is the podcast where connections thrive. Each episode, we spotlight inspiring entrepreneurs, professionals, and individuals doing amazing things. Together, we'll grow your circle, spark collaborations, and discover new opportunities. Today, we're meeting Akarsh Vinod, founder of Dio, a privacy-first wireless multi-room speaker system built for simplicity and ease of use. After leaving Meta Reality Labs, Akarsh set out to revolutionize the smart home audio experience by making it more intuitive, flexible, and accessible to everyone. How you doing today, Akarsh?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Pretty good. I can't complain. It's a great day. We're finally into spring, so the weather's not as bitterly cold. None of that going on right now. We just tornadoes. It's the Midwest, so but
Oh boy.
none on the horizon today. So really enjoyed our last conversation. You're doing really cool things. You have a really cool story, and there's a lot of people out there that would benefit from getting to know you. So wanted to have you on. But to start off, where are you calling in from? Where are you located?
I am from sunny California, the Bay Area near San Francisco. And it has, talking about weather, it has been frigid for California lately. So we're still waiting for the sun to consistently come out. But the good news is it barely rains usually, and it has been raining lately. And my car's gotten a nice little natural wash, which has been nice.
There you go. So are you originally from the area, or have you been there for a while, or are you newer to the area?
Yeah, I've been here for a while. I've been here since 2020. We actually moved up here when my wife started her graduate studies at Stanford. So she's still getting her PhD here. It's a long process. Um, but yeah, I've lived here for a while. I grew up outside of the US though. I was born in Qatar, where the last FIFA, World Cup was in 2020. And I graduated high school from Abu Dhabi. My parents still live there, so that's in the United Arab Emirates. And I came to the US for college, and since I've been here, I mean, I lived in Georgia. That's where I went to college. Lived in South Carolina, here in California now. And it kind of in the middle, I've traveled all over the place as well, in those areas. So yeah.
Awesome. So been there for 5 years. So you have your haunts and your favorite go tos. If you have friends coming in the town that have never visited before, where are you going? What are you doing? And what's for dinner?
Well, so we actually just had a friend from college come and visit, who hadn't really been here before. So I live in Santa Clara, which is like maybe an hour south of San Francisco. But usually when people come, we're like, oh yeah, we'll just go to the city. We'll see the Golden Gate Bridge. We'll kind of do all the classic stuff like that. But the good thing about living here is we're actually like also just an hour away from like Monterey with the really amazing big aquarium, which I'd be really excited to take my daughter to when she's a little bit older. We have a baby. Um, and we're also just maybe a few hours away from like Lake Tahoe, Yosemite. So it just kind of depends on what people are into. And if they're visiting, we'll be like, do you want nature? Do you want city? Do you want random attractions? Like we can find stuff all over, which is the beauty of California's extended metropolises.
Yeah, awesome. So plenty to do, but what about dinner? Are you more of the go out and get something fancy, get something special? Or are you a home cook, or what's that look like?
Oh man, I'm a bit of both. I love going out and getting food. But lately I've been trying to like learn how to cook a little bit better, like a bit fancier meal. So we've got a bunch of cookbooks, and at least once a week I'm trying out a new recipe. So a little bit of both. It just really depends on the situation. Being, parent to a young child is not actually always easy now to get out anymore. So we're trying to bring a bit of that experience into the home.
I got you. Do you have a go to like home meal where if you're trying to impress somebody, it's this is it?
Oh yeah, I make a mean just marinara pasta dish. I add a bunch of spices to it, and just garlic, onion powder, and a bunch of other stuff. I add a bunch of frozen mixed veggies, some chicken. So yeah, I think I do a pretty good job with the marinara sauce.
There you go. Awesome. Well, sounds good. But what can you tell us about what you do? What can you tell us about Dio?
Cool. Yeah. Well, Dio was, I mean, honestly, it's been a labor of love. Um, Several years ago, I started getting really into podcasts, podcasts and audiobooks, right? And we're on a podcast right now. And it got to a point where I was just like so immersed into just listening to things all the time. And it was amazing because now I could finally go do stuff around the house. I could go on runs. I could go like do whatever and take my content with me. And I wasn't just stuck to a screen, right? I didn't have to be glued to his TV screen on a couch or on my, you know, chair in front of my computer. I could actually just like listen to my audio wherever. But then I got to a point where like, I remember very distinctly I was listening to an audiobook in my home, um in the shower. And once I was done with the shower, I was like just standing there in my towel in my bathroom, waiting for the audiobook chapter to end. And it just kind of hit me being like, wait, the whole point of audio was that I wasn't stuck to like a specific device or specific thing, waiting, to not able to move around with my content. But then why am I stuck to this Bluetooth speaker in my bed, in my bathroom, right? Um, so Dio really kind of became a solution to that, where I went out there, I tried all these different like multi-speaker systems. I tried the Sonoses, I tried the Google Homes, I tried everything out there. And I just realized that like all the systems out there were just terrible. They really were just terrible. And I can get more into that later, but um, I wanted to make a way for people to very easily, affordably, and flexibly just access the audio content they like listening to anywhere in their home, so that they could set up these like little affordable speakers all over their home. And now if they're in the bathroom but then they need to go get dressed in their bedroom, they can actually have their audio play in both places or move their audio quickly to the other speaker, without a lot of hassle. And then if they then need to go like make breakfast or something, they can go do that in their kitchen, right? And just really have this very flexible experience throughout their entire home. And I just kind of learned that the reason, like, everyone seems to want something like this. People love home audio, but most people who don't have it, it's because it's either too expensive or it seems way too complicated to set up. And they might have even tried before and it was just way too complicated. So really, that's what I focused on in making Dio, was a system that was just super simple, very intuitive, and that just works for people. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, my follow up question was always, how'd you get started? But, we kind of touched on that. So, what is it that you love most about this, going from where you were before to here?
Oh man. I mean, there's a lot of different things. So, I mean, entrepreneurship definitely has its challenges, right? It's just not all green grass and rosy. But that being said, I worked in corporate America. I worked at big tech, for Meta with the Oculus VR headsets, smart glasses and stuff. And I worked in some other places too. And it is nice to focus on solving problems that are near and dear to your heart, and kind of really feel fully empowered to just go out and do that, versus maybe having to make sure that you're making the higher ups happy, or that you're maybe working on challenges that you have a little bit of distance from, right? And but you still need to get it done, right? Because you're a professional and you need to get it done, versus working on Dio. So that being said, there's a lot in entrepreneurship that's like very unsexy, and I wish I didn't have to deal with it. But at the end of the day, it's my baby, and so no matter what the challenge is or how unsexy or annoying it is, it's my it's my it's my company. I had to deal with it, and so there's a lot of just like internal motivation for getting that done. So I would say that's the best part, is that you do kind of get to work on the problems and the challenges that you actually care about, when you start a company, even if some of the problems and challenges are things that are very annoying.
Okay. I gotcha. So, a lot of the people we talk to, they're looking at certain clients or industries that they're best able to serve. Obviously, you having a B2C offering is just basically anybody that would fall into that category. But for you, this is different. You had an idea, you're creating it, there's a process. How long of a process is that? How did you kind of overcome some of the challenges that you were faced with?
Yeah, so to give you an idea, I probably started working on Dion in earnest in 2019, right? And I ended up launching the speaker to market. It was like a soft launch, like a beta launch, but still kind of having a product out in market in 2023, right? January of that year. So that was 4 years right there. And that was almost like an accelerated, like I would say like that's maybe a bit faster than a lot of these products even get launched, especially from like early concept to finally being launched. So it definitely took some time, in that sense, but there was a lot of kind of steps along the way. So I don't know, I'm happy to get into it, don't want to talk your ear off or bore you, but there certainly is a lot of things in the consumer world, I think, that's a bit different than starting maybe a services oriented company for businesses.
Yeah, no, and that's why I ask. The entrepreneurship's bigger than just service, bigger than. So it's kind of interesting to see what it looked like for your journey, because a lot of us are like, okay, I need to go out and get clients. You're like, I need to make a product that
Yeah.
is going to hit the roll before it goes out there. So no, it's definitely interesting, because it's similar struggles. As far as just being an entrepreneur, but then also its own unique set of them that you've been faced with. when you're looking at like networking and you're looking at meeting people, who have been the best industries or professionals that have been able to help you along this path?
Oh man, I mean that's a really good question, right? So I would say from just an individual standpoint, as you mentioned, right? Like especially because I live in Silicon Valley here, so there's entrepreneurs everywhere, right? But um, the best the best like people who've been able to help me out or people I've really learned from, it's not just like an entrepreneur, someone who's maybe done something like this. It's actually been the people who really have a knack for understanding how to build a brand, right? That was probably my biggest learning was when you're building consumer, you're kind of thinking, oh, this is the product, or this is the pain point, or this is the customer profile I'm going for, or whatever it is, right? But in reality, when I finally started shifting the way I was thinking about what I was building as not a product, right? Not a physical speaker company or anything like that, but really a brand, right? It's just like, what do we stand for, right? That is when I really was able to kind of like shift gears into thinking like, okay, like how do we develop the brand? How do we really make sure that like we people know the right things about us and it goes beyond just thinking about our product. But as you mentioned, right, like we think about privacy, we think about simplicity and ease of use, and how do we talk about those things rather than saying like we connect multiple speakers together around your house, right, and features and stuff like that. So the people who've been able to help me are people who really have either done that before, have really good way of thinking through like you're building a brand, you're a brand owner, like well, how do you build that up? um and in terms of industries and stuff, I would say because my own background is in engineering and supply chain, right? So I actually know operations, manufacturing. I know how to build stuff really really well. It did come together with people who actually, or like industries, right, like in terms of marketing, right, or outreach, PR. A lot of people in those spaces were the ones who really, I would say, had kind of the sense of like, oh, like here's the key missing link. Like you've got a great product, you've got a great whatever, you have a flexible supply chain, everything. But how do you get in front of consumer? How do consumers think? How do whatever? It's really it was really quite eye opening. Talking to people in PR or digital marketing or other industries like that.
Okay. What advice would you give to a new or an aspiring entrepreneur?
Good question. So, as I mentioned, this what I've done is a bit different from like there's different kinds of entrepreneurship, right? Like you can be starting again a services oriented company. You could be starting a software as a service oriented company. Um, you could be selling to consumers. You could be selling to businesses, right? You could be, and then of course you could be selling goods. And even the goods could be like again to specific industries, or they could be the consumers, a mass market. What I would say, right, is something that all of this has in common. As you mentioned, right, a lot of people on your podcast have probably talked about how like they're really thinking like how do you acquire clients, right, and have outreach and stuff. A lot of that's very similar to what I'm doing in the consumer space, but in a different way, right? So for for me, what I found out is like it's always important that your first step is to actually go out and like find people who you think are people who actually care about the solution you're trying to build, who'd actually buy it, who'd want to have it in their lives, and do what it takes to be able to, you know, show them what it is you're trying to do, and see if they're actually interested and what it would take to build that interest. So that's kind of, and that to me ties everything together, right? That means that if you're thinking about product and prototyping, right, like you need to have a prototype to be able to show people what you're trying to build so that you can get their feedback. But also you don't want to have a final finished good and then just try to like push it into their lives if that's not what they want. And so you need to do just the right amount of product development to be able to like do that, right? You need to be thinking also about like how do you maybe stand up a website or a landing page that talks about the problem you're trying to solve, has maybe videos, demos, whatever it is. And then have just a simple mailing list sign up and see if people are clicking that to sign up for your mailing list because they really resonate with the problem and they really want that. How do you drive traffic to that landing page? Then that becomes a marketing problem. Every one of the problems and challenges that you have, you can do without having a full product, and you can do as a way to keep like feedback cycles going to make sure you're building the right thing, building the right brand, building the right product, right? um, and so I would say to early aspiring entrepreneurs is if you have an idea, find that way of validating it with real people who really would be interested in purchasing that problem, that solution you're trying to offer. And that doesn't matter if you're building a physical good or if you're starting a service oriented company, if you're building software. that is like the most important. I wouldn't even say first step because it's a step that you're doing all the time, but it is one of the most important things that you need to be constantly thinking of as an entrepreneur before you make any major decisions on where you're going.
How can smart home audio be simple, seamless, and still protect your privacy?
That's a very good technology question right there. So, well, I'm going to kind of break this piece down into a few different smaller pieces, right? So, I want to focus on the audio part first because a lot of like right now we've kind of conflated this thing, smart home audio, right? Where like the smart home was supposed to be something that would allow you to completely replace your iPhone at home and allow you to have something, a device that controls other devices in your home, right? So it could be your light bulbs, your doorbell, your coffee makers. And that's a smart home, right? And then what a lot of tech companies did is like, oh, great, we have this device that can do all this processing and this control. Let's just stick a speaker on there. And now we'll call it a smart home speaker, smart home audio, smart speaker, whatever. But the problem is the speaker wasn't actually the point of the device, right? It wasn't meant to give you a way to just like engage with your audio content wherever you were. It was meant to be something that actually allowed you to control these other devices that were not related to audio around your entire home. And so with that comes a lot of the concerns, and you specifically mentioned privacy, right? Because when you build a hub device that's supposed to be smart enough and open enough to work with a variety of other devices in your home, that means that it needs to have a way of like really, identifying what those different devices are, what they can do, how, what commands you as a user can send to those devices. And so inherently that means that there's a lot of data that is just constantly being passed back and forth between the devices. That data and the processing for like, being smart enough to understand what you want to do with it, all that has to happen on a server somewhere because it can't really happen just like locally on your devices. And therefore what you end up with is one, right, like this hub that is basically knows everything that's going on in your home and monitoring everything that's going on in your home, right, and needs to have that monitoring. Two, that hub and all those devices need to basically talk to each other outside of your home in a server somewhere else, right? And then three is that when you want to interface with that hub, the most, easiest way to do that is through a voice assistant, right? Especially because on smartphones you actually have a lot of restrictions where you can't like build your own custom voice assistant, right? Like you can't see like you can't really use Alexa on your iPhone very easily and things like that. And so that you have to kind of have that control happening maybe on the hub itself, and that best way is to do that through a voice assistant. Now you got something that's listening to you all the time. So there's three problems, right? Which is monitoring, storing the data externally, and a microphone that's listening to you as well. And so to me that becomes a very serious conversation that people need to have about if they want to introduce that kind of technology into their homes, right? Like, do they really want something that's monitoring their home all the time, doing it remotely, and also listening to what they themselves are saying and the discussions they're having in the privacy of their own home? Or do they just want to listen to audio? Right, like that's really the question, right? Is like, if all you want is something to just listen to your audio content and engage with it around your home, and you don't care about the light bulbs, the smart light bulbs, and the doorbells and the coffee makers and the refrigerator and all that stuff, then don't do it. Like, it's don't you don't necessarily want to get a smart home audio device. So what we are doing kind of differently, right, at Dio, is that we, our speakers, just off the bat, they don't have microphones built into them, because there's no point. You're not trying to like talk to a voice assistant or anything, or process other stuff that's going on. You're just trying to listen to your audio. So they're built like speakers. They're not built like phones. The second thing is that they're also, everything that they do in terms of sending media files over to each other, syncing up together, making sure they're all in sync, all of that happens locally, right? So you're not actually having the speakers connecting to an external server somewhere and doing a bunch of like communication, and then coming back to your home, and taking your data elsewhere, and then bringing it back, or storing the data in that server. None of that's happening. It's all happening locally on your own Wi-Fi network. And so, when your phone sends, is streaming audio to the speakers, we're having the phone actually generate the audio on the phone, and then sending it over to the speakers. It's not like the phone is going to a server somewhere and saying, send that audio file over to the speaker, externally. So that is probably, the best way for me to describe how you could actually make home audio, right, private without having to introduce the other smart home kind of conflation and all the baggage that comes with it into your home.
Okay. What would you say is the biggest problem with the traditional multi-room speaker systems?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest problem has been who they're building for, right? So when you look at the data for audio, 96% of the population listens to audio every single day. And on average, people are listening over 90 minutes a day right now. And audio is the number one activity for things done daily on a smartphone, right? So it actually beats out social, use cases like phone calls, social media, it beats out videos, beats out gaming. People are spending more time on their smartphones just for audio than for anything else. So audio is like very like mass market, thing. Like everyone loves audio. But the problem is that the traditional multi-room speakers, right? When you kind of think about like Sonos pioneered the space, but we've also got like the Bose Home and pretty much, all the big audio companies have some version of like a Wi-Fi home speaker system. They're all very expensive if you look at them all, right? Several $100s to buy like an entry level Sonos speaker. Now you want to put multiple of them throughout your entire home, you're talking about like thousands of dollars in investment, right? And the reason for that is because they all of them, they're kind of built by and built for audiophiles, right? And who I mean for that are not people who are listening to audio all the time. It's actually people who have very particular needs on the sound experience they're having, right? They want something for immersive music experiences or home theater experiences. So they want things like Dolby Atmos built into their speakers. They want things like automatic acoustic balancing within their homes. And they want something that maybe is like super, bassy, or things that really kind of are for a very particular use of just kind of maybe spending a little bit of time listening to music, or watching something on TV and having that like big action scene, boom boom boom, home theater experience in their home, right? And that's very, very different from what the majority of people are doing, because when the majority of people are looking at audio, you also look at the data, right? And you actually see that back in like 2014, yeah, okay, we had like 80% of daily time spent with audio was on music. Now you fast forward to today, and that's gone down to like 50%, right? And it's actually decreasing. And what's picking up instead is podcasts, audiobooks, YouTube, and other audio content driven, experiences. And so that is, what I think multi-room speakers systems are doing wrong is they're really catering for this like market of audiophiles. It's a very small percentage of the population. And yeah, there are people who are willing to spend a lot of money on the perfect audio setup in their home. But then you've got like the rest of the population, which is pretty much ignored. And they're either, forced to spend the big bucks to buy those premium systems or to have nothing at all. Um, and so that is what I think the industry is doing wrong, and what I'm trying to do to correct it with Dio is finally build that solution for everyone else, so that we actually have something that's really easy to use, doesn't need all those really complicated features that make it really tough setup, and affordable at the same time. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. So all of that's part of this next question, but just to put a cherry on top of it, why you? What sets you apart from everybody else doing something similar?
Yeah, so I think I've actually just been really, really lucky in my career to develop skill sets in certain super key critical areas that not a lot of people have this mix in their career history. So when I started out after college, so I went to college as an engineer. I focused on robotics and automation systems. And then I was a robotics engineer in the auto industry for a few years. And so I knew how to build things, and I'd worked with really complex electromechanical systems. There was a bit of programming involved, a bit of electrical work involved, a bit of mechanical work involved. Pretty much kind of covered the basis from the engineering, from like an engineering foundations perspective, right? Then I kind of made a pivot in my career, and I got an MBA. So I switched to the business side, and then I worked at Meta for almost 4 years as a global supply manager. And that what that meant was that I pretty much owned a lot of like global supply managers own the manufacturer relationship with the company. So as we were building the Oculus VR headsets, the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, the Portal smart home tablets, I would own the relationship with certain manufacturers, and I would work with engineers to kind of design something that made sense to actually um, that we could commercialize, right, and then produce, mass produce, and things like that. And of course, there was a lot of negotiations. There was a lot of supply chain planning. There was a lot of cost, involvement and scrutiny. And I was kind of those were what I had to do, right? So this gave me a foundation on both the business side, being a really good business operator, and kind of knowing how to figure all that out, and an engineer. And so when I ran into the problem in my own life of like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be stuck like in my towel in my bathroom waiting for this audiobook chapter to end. And my first step was just to go out there and try stuff, right? I actually got some Google Homes, and I was like, wait, are you kidding me? This only at that time it only worked with like Spotify and YouTube or something. It was like two services. Maybe there was a third one. But I couldn't listen to anything else. I couldn't listen to my audiobooks on Audible, right? Clubhouse was starting to come out. Couldn't listen to that. Um, if I had like voice recordings from my mom on WhatsApp, well, I couldn't play those out loud. I had to go back to my phone. Just anything that was like any other audio case that was not Spotify or YouTube at the time was I couldn't listen to it on my speakers. And I was like, what the heck? This is crazy. Then I went out and I tried Sonos because apparently they had more compatibility. And yeah, they had more compatibility, but their app was really tough to use. It took me like 20 minutes to set up their speaker. And I'm a technical guy, right? And then again, there were still limitations, right? Like, because they still have to connect with only partnered audio services. And the reason they do that is because they still have the smart home type of technology of like they connect over cloud and do all this stuff. So I thought like there has to be a way to just send the audio that's already playing on my phone over to these other speakers, right? Um, and so I do think I was uniquely, suited to figure that out because I had the engineering background, I had the operations background, I'd worked in consumer electronics, I knew how to find like manufacturers and make this into a real product, and yeah, operate a company out of this whole thing. So yeah, so I would say that's kind of why me, right? I don't think this is something that just like any other person could have easily done. And I do know quite a few people who've come out to me afterwards being like, I've had the same problem and I've wanted to figure something out for it. And some of them were engineers, and I was like, I was tinkering around, but like I couldn't figure out how to like make it into a full product. Or there were other people who are not engineers who are like, man, like I had to like buy the really expensive equipment because I couldn't figure out like some of this other stuff, and I had to like jerry rig this and this and this. And so I think that's where I was like, cool. Well, luckily I had both sides to me, and I was able to kind of tie them together and make this thing a reality.
Absolutely. No, it's a finding something that needs a fix and then being the right person at the right time to do it. That's how all this happens. So no,
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome. So I know we could go down all the rabbit holes. There's a lot to this, but in general, is there anything that I missed or that I failed to ask that you wanted to add?
Um, I mean, nothing that you missed. I always just love a conversation, right? Um, and so yeah, I would say that like at this point we it's been just like such an amazing learning journey. And I think you'd asked earlier about how like advice I would give to entrepreneurs and stuff like that, right? I am certainly very open to entrepreneurs reaching out if they ever have questions about things. And I think I'll probably send you my contact info as well, right? And so I definitely encourage like anyone who listens to this, they're welcome to reach out, especially if they're looking at physical goods, physical products, consumer brands, things like that. And I certainly I'm always happy to even connect people with people I know, right? Whether it's other engineers, whether it is, we've now, our product's been picked up and published at several major outlets, Apple Insider, Mac Rumors, Android Guys, right? They've all reviewed our speakers and had pretty positive things to say, which I'm happy about. And I'm always happy to kind of help people on any part of the journey, whether it's connecting with folks like that, connecting with engineers, or just getting some, quick advice about certain challenges they're running into. Um, and feel free to ask me about tariffs as well if anyone's listening and wants to know about how to deal with that situation. I'm always happy to also share some of the things we're doing there. Um, but yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. For those that want to have that conversation, want to reach out, want to know more about you, more about Dio, what's the best way they do that? Where can they find you? How can they get a hold of you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, my email is pretty simple. It is Akrish, that's my first name, AKARSH, at dioconnect.com. That's our website. Um, so, Akrish at dioconnect.com. If they want to ask me specific questions, if they want to check out our product and really see like demos of it and animations and other information about it, if you're looking for, a speaker system in your home, dioconnect.com. That's the website. So it's DIO like audio, dioconnect.com because we connect audio around your house. So yeah, that's the best places to learn more and to reach out.
Perfect. And I'm gonna put it all in the show notes, so it'll be super easy to find. Just scroll, click, you're good. If anybody'd like to get a hold of Akrish, do it. He's a wealth of knowledge. Clearly knows what he's talking about. He has his business side, the engineering side. So there's all sorts of stuff there that you'll be able to kind of pry his brain about. Whether you're looking at products, if you're looking at entrepreneurship, if you're wanting to know more about deal, absolutely have that conversation. The exact same in a one-to-one as he is here. Plus, you can nerd out about audiobooks, which we did. But otherwise, if somebody would like to get a hold of me, you can find me at ikag.me. You can find more episodes, subscribe to our newsletter, and connect with our growing community of awesome people like Akrish. If you were somebody you know would like to be interviewed, you can also apply on our website. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time, kind of pouring into us about your journey, your experience. You're doing a lot of cool things. You have a really awesome story, and I'm glad we were able to hear it. But let's all go have an awesome day and grow our circles, all right?
Sounds good. Thank you, Anthony.
My pleasure.